I can see you, feel you everywhere around me. See you, feel you everywhere around me. Aurora Borealis.
Here in the northern Twin Cities, water and land are closely tied together. The landscape in this watershed has been going through a lot of transformation. Like the aurora borealis, water and earth have been incessantly changing. The glacier that moved through this area 10,000 years ago left behind a landscape of rolling, well-drained uplands dotted with lakes and wetlands in low-lying areas. In the 1800s, the Kaposia Band of Dakota Indians lived in a village on the banks of the Mississippi River, just below what is now St. Paul. They traveled from the river to the shoreline of Lake Jarvis and spent their summers there fishing, trapping, and foraging, where fish, other wildlife, and edible plants were plentiful. During this time, the land and the water remained relatively undisturbed. In the early 1840s, a French-Canadian voyageur named Benjamin Gervais had a land claim near Fort Snelling and traded with the Dakota Indians. The story of why his family left St. Paul and settled near Lake Jarvis is told in the words of his son, Basile Gervais. Not long after we settled at the foot of Robert Street, the Indians began telling my father what a fine location for a farm was at their summer camping ground. So Ben traveled by canoe from the Mississippi River up Phelan Creek through the chain of lakes to Lake Jarvis. He fell in love with it and decided to call it home. In 1844, on the banks of Jarvis Creek, which flows into Lake Jarvis, Ben built the first privately owned grist mill in Minnesota. Other French-Canadian settlers moved into the area, and by 1867, the land was carved into a series of homesteads and farms. The forests were gradually cut down to provide an abundant source of lumber for buildings. Barns, houses, and lake cottages sprang up overnight. The land was becoming tamed as settlers replaced native grasses and wildflowers with turf grass and other non-native plants brought here from other places around the world. The prairie plants had roots from 3 to 15 feet long that absorbed rainfall, allowing it to soak into the ground. But turf grass with short 2 to 3 inch root channels was no match for the prairie plants in helping water infiltrate into the ground. As the town of Little Canada began to grow, city streets replaced the dirt roads. Remy Ducharme owned the first car in Little Canada. It was a 1914 Auburn. It had carbon lights he had to light with a match. As the town grew up, Little Canada's identity as a truck farming community bloomed on the outskirts of the Twin Cities. Local families brought their produce to St. Paul to feed the growing city. Farming was a challenge. To make their land easier to work, farmers used horses and oxen to plow furrows to draw the water away from their fields. Later, gas or steam-powered ditching machines drained farm fields and wetlands. This one, called the Swamp Buster, had its living quarters behind it. Without the wetlands to absorb heavy rainfalls, much of this stormwater ran off, carrying pollutants from farm fields, rooftops, and yards into nearby Jarvis Creek. The creek, once a slow, meandering stream, eventually was moved and straightened to make room for a conduit bringing water to the city. It became known as County Drainage Ditch Number 16 that dumped its runoff into Jarvis Lake. The farm fields, prairies, forests, and wetlands in the 40s and 50s were transformed into paved streets, parking lots, businesses, homes, and freeways. What would Remy Ducharme think now if he could see the maze of roads that now crisscross this community? All these changes created with urbanization have had a large impact on the water quality and habitats in Jarvis Creek, Jarvis Lake, the Phelan chain of lakes, and the Mississippi River downstream. It can be said that what has been done to the land is very often mirrored in our waters. Before development here in Little Canada, stormwater was easily absorbed by the plant materials covering the ground, thereby protecting the creek and lake from erosion and sedimentation. But as we have altered our land uses to agriculture, then to buildings and paved surfaces, we have created stormwater runoff problems. These are serious problems. How do we solve them? Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District, a local government agency, has been very involved in helping to improve the water quality of Lake Jarvis and the rest of the Phelan chain of lakes. They partner with cities, schools, residents, businesses, developers, and others to protect and restore water quality throughout the 56 square miles of largely developed urban watershed in the East Metro area of the Twin Cities. In 2005, the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District constructed its offices on the banks of Jarvis Creek in Little Canada.
Welcome to the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District office site in Little Canada, Minnesota. Our organization is responsible for managing stormwater, protect our creeks, wetlands, and lakes from flooding and pollution. Our office is on the banks of Jarvis Creek, which flows into Jarvis Lake just 2 blocks away.
The demonstration office site is designed to model 3 main best management practices that can be used to stop water where it drops: green roofs, rain gardens with native plantings, and pervious surfaces such as porous asphalt or pervious pavers. We'll look at the implementation of these features at the Watershed District site, as well as at schools, churches, and other partners in the community. One thing the techniques have in common is they can all be used to reduce the volume of stormwater washing into our sewers, lakes, wetlands, and streams. They can also improve water quality by filtering out nutrients, dirt, harmful chemicals, and bacteria, and reduce thermal pollution caused by water running over hard surfaces such as dark parking lots or asphalt shingle roofs in the middle of summer. When pollutants run off these hard surfaces during a rainstorm, aquatic life is impacted. Too much sediment can clog up and cover aquatic habitats for both plants and animals. Increased nutrients, like phosphorus, result in too much algae in ponds, lakes, and creeks. As all that algae decomposes, oxygen in the water is used up, and that's the oxygen that fish and other aquatic wildlife need. But our stormwater can actually be a resource if we let it soak in. As it soaks into the ground, the nutrients and pollutants get filtered out, and the water cools down, entering our creeks and lakes cold and clean. The Watershed District took the lead several years ago in creating a demonstration green roof to monitor its capacity to capture rainfall and to do research on the varieties of plants that are most adaptable to rooftop conditions.
So when we have visitors come and they ask about the green roof and they sort of look at it and they don't see what they expect, they don't see like the gardens on the ground on the roof, and so they wonder, well, where are the plants? We have a goal of attaining 80% coverage of the roof, and we are getting closer to that, but we're not there yet. Over time, we expect that the Minnesota natives to fill in by seed mostly, and for the non-native sedums to fill in by spreading and by rooting as they sort of break off from their parent plant.
Well, come along and we'll show you how water stops when it drops on our roof. The function of this green roof is to retain and use stormwater so that less of the stormwater runs off the roof. As you can see, the prairie grasses are flourishing at the lower end of the roof. We have a columbine here that's also flourishing, when most of the roof is covered with sedum.
The Watershed District's green roof holds between 60 and 90% of a rainfall that is an inch or less, which is most storms. The plants they chose are a mixture of native and non-native plants that absorb stormwater and provide a habitat for insects. Staff had a chance to be part of the planting process.
Some of my memories of planting on the green roof is just getting over my fear of getting up on that ladder and being a part of what other staff do. Since I'm the secretary here, I don't get to do a lot of those things, and it was just really exciting for me to get up on that roof and plant and actually be one with nature, really. There were squares set up for different plants that Julie Vignes-Pint had set up, and each of us took a square and planted a certain species in that square, and we had to use these boards so that we can kneel on them, that we wouldn't slide down.
A green roof does cost more than a standard shingle roof. It's about $25 per square foot versus $7 for a standard shingle roof, but it can last 2 to 3 times longer. Green roofs are catching on in various parts of the Twin Cities and in our own watershed. Capturing stormwater and long-term savings on roof installation costs were also incentives for the city of Woodbury, where recently they installed a green roof on a section of their new city hall.
We wanted to kind of put in a demonstration project because this is something that we think a lot of commercial buildings could use, but nobody's done it, so we wanted to give a little demonstration so we can show people what we're doing. It's like I got royalty up here today.
So this is the big green roof, huh?
Yeah, this is Woodbury's green roof. The plants you're looking at are called sedums. There are 7 different varieties of sedums up here. The soil medium that they're growing in is a very coarse kind of soil, which doesn't have a lot of organic in it, but these kind of plants like that. So the hope is that these plants will grow well here, but nothing else will, so we won't have to spend a lot of time weeding it. Basically how this was built is there's a regular roof, then there's a rubber membrane, then there are plastic trays that have about 4 inches of soil. The trays are just placed on the rooftop on top of that rubber membrane. A normal roof, as soon as it rained, it would immediately be draining into that wetland. All the roofs do that, so the wetland bounces a lot, and that's kind of hard on the plants and animals that live around the edge. This kind of a thing slows the water down, and as some of it gets evaporated back into the atmosphere, so it doesn't send as much water to that wetland. The other good aspect of a green roof is energy conservation, in that regular black roof, on a hot day it can get up to 170 degrees.
Right.
This kind of a roof pretty much stays at what the regular temperature is, because the water being pumped out of the plant is the same process as us when we sweat. The sweat cools us and the water cools the roof. So it saves energy and air conditioning in the summertime.
There are some other folks in the watershed who are interested in exploring the possibility of green roofs to stop water where it drops. Mounds Park Academy is making plans to add a new cafeteria onto their school. They are working on a green roof demonstration model to raise interest on their campus.
And our dream is to incorporate a rooftop garden into the design of that roof. This project that Christine Hansen, our senior, has put together will help us study how that works and how we can incorporate it into that project.
Catherine and Abby, we have to measure 6 sections.
Julie Vignes-Pint and other Green Roof Council volunteers provide education and technical support to help the community implement sustainable building practices and reduce environmental impacts.
I am working on a project called Roof Bloom, where we are putting together a set of resources for homeowners who are interested in doing a do-it-yourself green roof on a shed or a garage. There are these sort of sock things here. Each one of those 34-inch pieces goes into one of these socks, and ideally there's going to be enough of this to tie a knot on each end. Okay? Christine was mentioning earlier how this project was not like any other project she had worked on before. And I reminded her that this project was probably not much like anything anybody had done before.
Is there a reason for these? There's 4 little compartments, about a yard square.
There is. This first one really replicates a typical shingle roof. And then these other 3 will be planted with various species of plants, a different mix in each one. And then inside of here, there are funnels which will collect the water during a rainfall and empty it into a container. And then we'll measure the amount of of rainfall and how much water actually is not infiltrated within these four systems.
Mitch Thompson students will plant the green roof model.
Right now we need to put in dirt and it needs to go over this layer.
Ooh, it is a mixture. You want the whole thing in there, I hope?
Yep.
This growing media is an engineered, lightweight, expanded shale rooftop mix. In the 4 squares, the students are planting sedums, native grasses and forbs, and cacti, with 1 square left empty to model a standard roof.
And this is a cactus that can make it through the winter here.
Another school decided to take their green roof project on the road. Cindy Schreiber's 6th grade class at Farnsworth Aerospace spent a whole year researching green roofs. They developed a tour for the public, which included a stop at this innovative green roof labyrinth on the east side of St. Paul. Community of Peace Academy needed to build a new gymnasium on their property, but had to address the challenge of losing green space on their lot, so they installed a green roof.
This is what we call a modified labyrinth. A labyrinth is a walking path that people can use to meditate. There are laws in the city that you can't put this many buildings on a block. And so we had to go to our city council and talk to them about what we were planning to do. And some neighbors came to that meeting who were not very happy with our plan. And they didn't want all the water running into their basements that would normally have soaked into the ground here. When our city councilman came to talk to me about the project, he was looking out that window up there with me, and I was showing him that this is where the gym would be, and it was at that time, you know, grass and stuff and playground, and he said, you know, that would be a great project for a green roof. When I found out it was possible, I was very excited and very thrilled that we could even consider such a thing. And then, you know, that we were actually able to do it was just wonderful.
The Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District is a leader in modeling innovative stormwater technologies in the community. Its porous asphalt parking lot was the first of its kind in Minnesota.
Oh boy, looks like rain. If I don't leave, I am going to get wet. It's raining. I'm getting a little wet. The pavement's getting a little wet. The flowers are getting their moisture. You might notice a few places where the water is not soaking in quite so fast, but if you look at the rest of the parking lot, you'll see the water just goes down in between those stones and down below in the storage space below this parking lot.
Porous bituminous pavement has the same asphalt and coarse aggregate as regular pavement. Sand and other fine materials that could plug the pores is left out.
And what it does is it runs through the regular asphalt, and then this is actually called a choker course. What this is it basically chokes the spaces in between here to make a nice solid base for this top asphalt so we can drive on it easier. Below that, there's on average of 32 inches of granite. So it's very important that we have big, strong rocks that'll withstand a lot of heavy traffic. And then below this, there's actually a sand layer, but what that represents is our ground underneath. Temperature is a big thing. If it's raining here on a really hot day, one of those bright sunny days, and all of a sudden we get one of those flash flood rains, it has time to cool down before it gets into the water table, before it goes to the stream.
Microbes in the soil break down gasoline and oil.
What they'll do is they'll actually break down some of those toxins. They'll digest it and spit out something that's a lot better for the environment. Basic things like oxygen and carbons that aren't as dangerous to our lakes and streams.
A number of cities, schools, and churches in the watershed are beginning to try out the technology of porous pavement in their parking lots.
And if you take a look at our parking lot, you may see that it's slightly different than parking lots you commonly see at the grocery store or the mall. Now, who can tell me by raising their hand how ours is different?
St. Peter's Catholic Church was looking for an ecologically sound way to infiltrate stormwater with their expansion.
The parish and the building committee was very open to the concept, and we just saw it as an opportunity to alleviate or decrease the amount of runoff from our parking lot into the gutters, which leads to our lakes and streams.
So the slope of the parking lot causes the water to run down to the pervious pavement, and then it soaks into the ground.
The Watershed District works with developers at construction sites like St. Peter's that are 1 acre and larger to make sure they use best management practices to prevent and address erosion and runoff issues. Permanent inspection staff guide these projects from the early planning stages through their construction and completion to ensure the sites are permanently stabilized and continue to protect water downstream.
I'm Paige Wine, the permanent inspector for the Watershed District. We're here at a construction site just going to do a routine inspection. I like to look at the perimeter of the site to make sure that nothing is leaving the site, look at all the water outlets, make sure any discharge coming off the site is clean.
Construction sites are required to use silt fences to keep all the sediment within their construction limits.
One of the requirements of the permit is to have perimeter control on site of anywhere exposed soil can reach a water of the state. A storm gutter is considered water of the state. A lot of sediment that has washed out and the water is flowing down so that it reaches this inlet. And if the inlet protection fails or becomes overcome with sediment, the sediment will go into the storm sewer and then it would reach into Battle Creek.
Construction sites require a variety of best management practices to stop water where it drops. We've looked at 2 of these BMPs at the Watershed Office and in the community, green roofs and porous parking lots. These technologies work well for managing stormwater on larger sites. Let's look at a BMP that can be used on either large or small sites. Rain gardens, showy or simple, can help us address runoff issues. A rain garden is built with a shallow depression to capture runoff from roofs, driveways, and other impervious surfaces. These gardens are designed to infiltrate water within 24 to 48 hours. They are not intended to have water standing in them for very long. Downspout or waterfall, either way, water still has to travel from a high spot to a low spot.
As in all building sites, a very large part of the site is the roof. Our roof drains into the center, down the scupper, and then the scupper falls into the splash garden. The splash garden then flows into that scupper and off into the largest, showiest rain garden on our site.
If you walked around the Watershed District's demonstration rain gardens, you would find a variety of rain gardens designed with different choices of vegetation, ranging from a highly diverse mix of native plants to a much simpler combination of grasses and sedges that are easy to maintain. All the rain gardens that you see along Knoll Drive were constructed to handle the stormwater from the street. Stormwater flows across a band of turf that filters out the sand, salt, and sediment. Then the water moves into the rain garden and infiltrates into the soil. Any oil, gasoline, or other pollutants are filtered out as the water soaks through the layers of soil.
Here we are in one of our rain gardens. Check out the plants. New England aster is thriving, and goldenrod is a little bit on its way out, but it's still pretty. All the plants that you see here are adapted to high water levels that come in after a storm and build up, and then eventually within 24 or 48 hours will disappear soaking into the ground, and then plants adapt to that kind of water level. Roots create pores in the soil, and as the roots die off, then they leave a pore space in the soil, and then new roots will grow, and they get deeper and deeper, creating a sponge effect in the soil. With a sponge, more water is able to soak in.
The Watershed District monitors runoff and infiltration of its green roof, parking lot, and rain gardens.
Throughout our office site, we have a bunch of these PVC pipes. Within them, we have these Thalamedes level loggers, and what they do is measures the level of the water. There's this little yellow float. As the water rises, so does it. And it floats up, takes readings about every 5 minutes. And then we can see it go down as the water infiltrates.
There are one of those in every one of our rain gardens so that we can manage and monitor according to the ability of the rain garden to infiltrate water.
And it's been pretty successful. A lot of the rainwater gardens can infiltrate quite a bit of water fairly quickly.
There are lots of examples of people in our watershed who have decided to try out rain gardens on their own land to help runoff soak into their yards and keep it from draining into nearby streets and water bodies.
We've installed several rain gardens here based upon the infiltration and the runoff that we needed to take care of for this building project. The original plan, honestly, was to just lay sod in these areas, but we contacted your offices and we had some great help and some ideas with how to put in some native landscape.
It's a soft stem bulrush, and we're planting these underwater to try to help clean out the rainwater basin, just so that the waters are cleaner and less polluted. So
what we're trying to do here is we're making a path. We noticed that this particular area, it always has water. So what we need to do is put plants in here that like being in the water. And then those plants will grow and they will help actually clean the water up.
In addition to rain gardens being used in public places, they can be a beautiful as well as functional addition to home lawns. Master gardeners with the University of Minnesota Extension Service have taken a special interest in helping homeowners learn more about creating rain gardens to improve water quality.
When we found out that the watershed was looking for homes in this area to do other rain gardens, we decided that this would be a great place because we wanted to catch the runoff from our house. We don't like to have gutters on the front of the house, so all of the rain now runs into that little riverbed and into here.
I'm part of the Community Design Center. We built I think 5 or 6 rain gardens. I was just kind of interested in building one in my backyard.
The bottom of the part that was excavated is nice and flat, so it has a big area for absorbing water. And yesterday we spread all the wood chips out and had the young man water it thoroughly so that we'll have a nice damp soil to plant into today. Well, at this site, it's basically just city dirt. What else can I call it? We did not put in much in the way of amendments. We're not down to a subsoil. It's a sandy loam that we're going to be planting into. That's the advantage of using native plants. You don't have to have wonderful, soft, composted soil. The native plants are developed over the millennia to grow in just plain, ordinary soil, nothing fancy.
The choices for this rain garden are a combination of shade and sun-loving plants. The team shows ferns, prairies, and wet meadow species.
And then you can scoop this in. Just kind of a little bit, because this is the soil that was there, which we want to get it used to. And then this is the soil that they were growing in. So it'll get a little bit of the flavor of both.
Oh, I think this is going to be so wonderful. And you're going to be watering. You might have to teach your little sister how to water.
Like any new plantings, watering rain gardens is necessary during the first couple of growing seasons. But as they mature, native plants develop deep root systems that do well even during dry seasons.
Stopping stormwater before it runs off into our lakes, wetlands, and streams is a goal we can all help achieve.
We invite you to look around your neighborhood for places that you too can try out some of these practices. People around the community have been discovering the benefits of green roofs, rain gardens, and porous parking lots. All of these best management practices will help keep runoff from degrading our valuable water resources.
Having toured our site and explored others around our watershed, I hope you've been inspired by the need and the possibilities for stopping water where it drops.
Walking near the water, sitting in the rocks, watching the waterbird fly. Listen to the rhythm as the tide talks like by, and away I go, away I go, away